Today, we're going to be talking about the fourth action plan, which is about supporting our union brothers and sisters and all working families. The modern Democratic Party came out of the actions of Franklin Roosevelt, who saw what was happening in the Depression, how people had not enough to eat, no place to live, inadequate clothing, no job, no school. And he understood that the national government had to step in to correct this human devastation. And he built a coalition that ran from north to south that is still holding more or less today. But we have to maintain those commitments to bread and butter issues, to the things that regular families worry about every day. How are we going to pay the mortgage? How are we going to provide enough food for our family? What if our kids want to go to school or college? What are we going to do if one of us loses a job or we want to get a bigger house? All of those basic economic questions that are tied to human dignity must remain at the heart of the Democratic Party. And sometimes it's easy to forget that. So, one of the things that I believe in is that we must take active steps. If I become chair, I will take active steps to support this. For most people, prosperity is based on having a few very important pieces of the puzzle, four legs on a table, if you will. We need a good home, a good school, a good doctor, and a good job. And now in the 21st century, we know that we need a decent environment, a place to live, a planet that will sustain us. And yet sometimes we forget those things, and we forget that unions are often at the front line of making sure that we get those things, that we have decent housing, and that we have good medical care or education, and that we are able to earn decent work and decent pay. So, as chair, I want to make sure we never forget that. I mean, one thing we should never forget is that we still have a terrible wage gap between men and women. Men might earn $1, but white women might earn 79 cents. And a Black woman might earn only 63 cents. And a Native American woman would earn only 60 cents, and a Latina would earn only 55 cents. Now, this is for the same work. And that kind of disparity, that kind of injustice does damage not only to individuals and their families, but to whole communities when those hardworking people do not have enough money to take back out into the economy. So in my plan, what I lay out are many steps where we could be providing more mutual support. We could be looking into and supporting the many new forms of economic democracy, where it isn't just about how much money you make for shareholders, but also how much you pay your workers, what kind of impact you have on your community. We also need to increase the diversity that certain unions and other groups have in their training programs. The building trades has done a wonderful job of bringing young women and people of color to learn those building trades. And we also need to, as we're thinking about working families, to remember that there are veterans families. Veterans also need good home, school, doctor, and job. They certainly have earned it, and yet too often we fail. And then finally, people we might not think of right away, people with disabilities who also want those things, but are often ferociously discriminated against because people look at those who are different and apply prejudice and assume they can't get those things done. I've worked with labor unions for more than 40 years. I'm a member of a union, UAW Local 1981. My wife is an officer of her union down at the Rhode Island School of Design and has been involved in years of contract negotiations. So we understand that unions are an important piece of the puzzle for middle-class prosperity. Going back to 1980, I worked with a group of labor leaders to create new systems for corporate accountability. And I've also walked many picket lines, so many, frankly, that I forget. But, just a few years ago, we had the massive Verizon strike. I walked that picket line. Not that many years ago, just recently, we had the National Grid lockout, where National Grid illegally locked out its workers because they didn't want to negotiate. I walked repeatedly walked the picket line for that lockout and spoke to those workers who were holding on despite many difficulties. And we understand that all working people are not asking for too much. They're asking for the basics of the American dream. And I believe that we, as the Democratic Party, if we maintain that focus, we won't be losing people defecting to Trump and or whoever succeeds him. We will be able to make the strong case that our party stands for regular working folks who are just doing the best they can with the resources they can to protect their families, to build up their communities, and frankly, to love this country.